Hey everyone, it's Adrian from the Pageant Project. My special guest for this morning in the UK is Jordan-Louise Smith, who is a Miss Universe GB finalist. Jordan, how are you?
I'm well, thank you. And yourself?
I'm doing very well. What's the weather like in sunny UK? You're actually in summer at the moment.
I live in Scotland, so can we ever really call it sunny? I'm not entirely sure. It's kind of grey, but it's dry. And the temperature is okay.
Is that about as good as Scotland gets?
I mean, we have had some nice weather of late, but we've just gone back to the standard sort of this is Scotland at its finest now, yeah. I think we're about
Okay.
17, 18 Celsius with just grey cloud covering most of the sky.
17 or 18 is not too bad for you guys because what I've noticed is anytime it goes over 20 degrees, you guys all go outside, run to the beach, and all get sunburnt.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I do pretty well. I don't burn too much, thankfully. I feel like I was made for a warmer climate, but I moved to Scotland. Um, that was, a great decision on my part. But yeah, no, 17, 18, it's quite a nice temperature, I feel like it's manageable. It would just be nice if, I could wear sunglasses outside without looking like I was trying to hide my identity, like actually serving a purpose.
I'm going to Texas in about a month's time, and I looked at the weather forecast. It's 40 degrees, 40, and like 90%, 100% humidity. How well would you deal with that sort of weather? Because I'm panicking a little bit, and I'm from Australia.
I don't do too. I mean, I guess it depends because obviously out there they are, I guess, a little bit more prepared for it in terms of aircon, which is not something that really exists many places other than a car in the UK. Um, but yeah, I mean, the fact that cars have aircon but no buildings is interesting. But no, I don't do too badly. I mean, I like when I go on sort of holidays, warm weather holidays, I'm like a 30, mid 30s. I'm very, very comfortable at that
Oh,
level. So. I mean, the humidity could be a different
yeah.
aspect to it, although my hair goes nice and curly when it's humid. So, one win, I guess.
Are you sure you're from Scotland if you can deal with 30, 35? I've never heard of anyone from the UK who can deal with that sort of weather.
Well, I mean, I'm originally English, but living in Scotland now, I think there is some potential. I mean, I've never done the DNA genetics testing. Maybe that would be a good way to go.
There must be something else in there because English or Scottish, you guys are just not cut out for 35 degrees. But just to bring it back to
Yeah.
pageantry for a second, you are a Miss Universe GB finalist. Now, just bring our audience up to date. When is the actual final? It's in like
Next
less than
week.
2 weeks.
Yeah, next
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 week.
weekend. So a week on Saturday. Actually, a week today, I will be probably an hour or so into my drive down. It's going to be about an 8, 9 hour drive for me. So it's going to be a nice, fun one, getting down to Cardiff. But yeah, that'll be setting off a week today. Be on the way.
Just what you need to put you in a good mood before pageant time is an 8 hour drive. How are the nerves a week out? How is it feeling? Has it actually hit home that you're about to compete in the biggest pageant in GB yet?
We're getting there. I think this week has
We're
sort of
getting there.
really started to, this week it has sort of really started to hit, but more than anything, I'm just excited to be there at this point. I think everything has just sort of been a bit of a whirlwind, but in
Mm.
the best possible way. So I am very excited. It is definitely starting to feel very, very real. And I think that the last minute panic stresses, which a few of my friends can definitely attest to, have started kicking in. But no, I am. I'm really excited for it.
So you have had some nerves, some have you are you the sort of person when you get a bit like because everyone in the lead up to pageant has sort of dramas, whether it's with dresses or something else. Do you have someone that you can yell at, someone that you cry to? Like, are you the yeller? Are you the crier? Do you have a tantrum? What
Um,
happens when?
I'm just the excessive voice noter, just so that I can get everything, all of the thoughts out of my head. So I think the people that have been facing the brunt of that have been Danny Latimer, Meg Goldberger, and one of my friends Frankie, who's one of the Scottish pageant girls. And yeah, those three, I
I know
can see Danny
Frankie.
commenting now as
Yeah,
well. But those three have
Danny has.
definitely been getting the brunt of my voice notes.
Well, Danny is not adverse to sending a whole barrage of voice notes either. I will let you know. I sometimes will at like 3 in the morning get a barrage of voice notes from her. And the best one was the most recent one where she started recording one and went on a rant, and for some reason it didn't pick up her voice. So the whole time it was just like this. So she's you're in good company there. But tell us about your pageant history. So I'm not particularly familiar with it. Is this your first pageant, or have you pageanted before?
It's not my first pageant. It is, I guess, I want to say my third. I mean, I guess it kind of is a bit more. I don't know. It's my third national
Okay.
because I started out in the Miss England system, which I think is probably quite a common occurrence with UK pageant girls.
Yeah.
Did one of the junior heats, which doesn't actually sort of progress to anything. It's just like a local ambassador in 2013.
Hmm.
I did that. That was Junior Miss South Lakes, which is the area I was from. And then as I aged up, when I was 17, I competed in Miss Cumbria, which I won, which then progressed me to the Miss England finals back in 2015. I was 17 at the time, and it was a very interesting experience. After that, I did go on a bit of a competing hiatus for a while. I haven't actually, basically between 2015 and
I
earlier
was
this
going
year,
to
I
say
hadn't stepped foot on
7 years.
stage. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I was always sort of following in the background. So I knew still what was going on, and I was still watching a lot of, the
Mm-mm.
pageant systems and following all of the girls. Because prior to Miss England, I didn't really know that pageantry was that big of a thing in the UK. I had no idea about it. It was only through the girls that I competed with that I was then introduced to the entire world of it. And at first, I was just sort of a bit taken aback. I didn't really know what to do, so I just sort of sat and watched from afar. And during lockdown, actually, I just decided that I really needed to do something for myself, something that I
Yeah.
enjoyed, just to bring some joy back after everything that we'd sort of gone through. So I decided to enter into another pageant, and I competed in Young European Miss International, Yemi,
Hmm.
earlier at the start of this year. It was it was a fun experience. I realized, I think, that maybe that style of system isn't necessarily where I'm most suited.
Hmm.
After going through it, I wouldn't, it's nothing bad against the system at all. It's just,
No.
sometimes you fit and sometimes you don't. And it was after having conversations with a few of my friends after Yemi that they were like, well, what's next? And I was like, I don't know. I know what my eventual end goal is. I just don't know where to go next. And I had that conversation with Danny, and it was that, eventually I want to compete in Miss Universe Great Britain. I want to go to Miss Universe. That's where I want to go. But I kind of felt like I needed to pay my dues first. And Danny was just like, Jordan, stop. And she directed me to an interview that Paula had done, like a podcast interview, where she had
Hmm.
addressed that exact topic of, for some reason, there is this myth surrounding universe that you do need to pay your dues first, and you need to have a lot of experience to be able to compete in it. And she was trying to sort of cast that aside. And it was
Yeah.
after listening to that I decided, actually, maybe I will apply. The application deadline had been extended by a month, which meant that I had like a little bit of time after competing to be able to submit my application.
Right.
And I think I did so about 2 or 3 days before the deadline. I was like, I just got to get it done. I've just just got to go for it and see where it goes from there. So that was the end of February.
I think it's interesting you mentioned this almost misnomer that you have to pay your dues because Danielle's watching. Danielle can remind me. I think Jeanette, that was her first ever pageant when she won. But I do think you need to pay your dues in a different way, which is your own personal journey. I think Universe really needs a woman who actually knows what she stands for. Not to say she's a finished product, but has some idea of who she is, some self-awareness, let's put it that way. So, I mean, on that note, let's dig into your advocacy, which is strongly tied to eating disorders. And obviously that's a huge...
Oh, I don't know what's happened. I don't know if you can hear me.
And I'm back. Can you hear me?
Back. I can, yeah, sorry.
Sorry, that's my Australian internet. But let me give the floor to you. So in terms of eating disorders, why is your advocacy in that area?
First and foremost, it is that I have got first-hand experience suffering with an eating disorder. I've suffered with an eating disorder that is particularly unknown. It is one of the rarer and lesser known types of eating disorder for pretty much my entire life. And I've also had experiences with other types of the disorder as well. And it's sort of through my experiences, my lived experiences, that I realize how difficult it is to be taken seriously, I guess, if you're not the typical stereotype of what an eating disorder looks like, how difficult it can be to even get a diagnosis and get the treatment that you so need. It is extremely difficult living in the current modern society with an eating disorder. And I genuinely think that the vast majority of that stems from the fact there is just too little awareness and knowledge on the subject. I mean, as you say, it's a very, very vast subject, so there is a lot to cover in that. But I think that sort of just increasing education from as early as possible, really, because eating disorders are, they can start as early as sort of toddler childhood years in a lot of people, which I think surprises a lot of people to hear as well. But being able to spot those signs in yourself when you're older, but really importantly, you've been able to spot that in other people, because when you are that young, it is really difficult. I wasn't self-aware when 3 years old, when mine started, I wasn't self-aware enough to be able to, say, oh, I've got this issue. It was much later on in life. Thankfully, I had my parents advocating for me. I was really fortunate in that. But that is where the vast majority of it comes from. And I think that we have made strides with mental health as a whole in terms of making that more normalized, more discussed. But I think eating disorders is still extremely taboo. A lot of people don't associate them as a mental illness because they do have such a physical impact. But first and foremost, they are a mental illness. It is a condition of the brain. And people, it's something that I find it can be quite hard to articulate, I guess, without sounding too preachy. But I think that it is just that there's a lot of disparity between eating disorders and other more well-known types of mental illness that I would like to try and squash, because eating disorders are the biggest killer of all mental illnesses, yet nobody speaks about them. And that's probably what, contributes to them being the biggest killer, because you can't get help until you're pretty much at, death's door already.
Yeah, I'm not going to use the word interesting. That's not an accurate term, but in this day and age, if you suffer from depression or anxiety or suicidal ideation, there does seem to be more awareness around that issue and more acceptance. But I think around eating disorders, there's still, for some reason, I think there's still more of a stigma around it. I'm not exactly sure why. But just to backtrack a little bit, Jordan, are you actually able, and if you can't, that's fine, but are you able to tell us what the disorder that you have is?
Yeah, of course. I'm very, very open about it all. So I suffer with a condition called avoidant restrictive food intake disorder, otherwise known as ARFID, is its acronym, and it is
Hmm.
essentially a phobia aversion to food that is unfamiliar. I have a very sort of limited number of safe foods. Uh,
Hmm.
Safe foods. I know all food
I
in.
understand.
I know that all food is safe, but I
I
have a
understand.
limited number of safe foods that I can eat, I will eat, and anything sort of outside of that is extremely distressing, and it's just a very, very difficult process. I think I have had one of the easiest ways to sort of describe it is really severe panic and anxiety attacks when,
Mm.
you know, unfamiliar food is put in front of me. It is a very, very extreme form of a phobia that has a very physical reaction. Shaking, my throat feels like it closes, my jaw clenches shut. You know, there have been times in my childhood where people have tried to force feed me food.
Yeah.
And it is like this vice-like grip that just happens, and it is not something that I am consciously doing. It is just my body's really extreme reaction to something that, you know, it considers to be terrifying. Now, there can be a lot of different things that trigger such sort of
Hmm.
phobias. Because mine started so young, it is quite hard to actually put a finger on exactly where it was, but it was sort of, we think, linked to me being really ill as a child, and I wasn't able to eat or keep down solid foods for pretty much the first 3 years of my life. So
Wow.
that is where, you know, it all seems to stem from. But I also mentioned that I had a little bit of experience elsewhere, you know, as well. It has been the thing that has, you know, dominated the vast majority of my life in terms of the eating disorder side of things.
Mm.
But whilst I was at university, I also struggled with bulimia. It was atypical bulimia because it wasn't necessarily linked to body image, which again made it quite difficult to get a diagnosis. For me, it was very much about control. There were elements of it that were linked to, I guess, my image, but any part of it that was related to that, I genuinely think has stemmed from the dismissal that I received during trying to get help for ARFID. The one
Yeah.
thing I remember very, very vividly, and I think I probably mention it every time I talk about it, because it just really grates on me, is I went to a GP when I was about 18. I was in my first year of university. I was really, really struggling, you know, living in university halls, surrounded by people
Mm.
that I didn't know. I'd
Yeah.
you know, I'd always struggled with my food, but at least when I was with my friends from back home, living in my family home, with my partner, there were people that were really aware of my situation and tried to make me feel as comfortable as possible. The 11
Yeah.
strangers that I shared a kitchen with at university did not have that same,
Mm.
you know, same
Compassion,
predisposition. Yeah.
understanding.
And it was made extremely, extremely difficult. So I went to my GP to try and get help. And in no uncertain terms, they told me, yeah, it sounds like you've got a problem, but you weigh too much to have an eating disorder. At that point, I was like a UK size 8, just to put that into comparison terms. I was told that I weighed too much to have an eating disorder because I was considered healthy. And that was by the medical professional who is and is still meant to be the first port of call if you think you are struggling with an eating disorder. Um, and I mean, I was lucky, I guess, that it wasn't something I was struggling with was my weight, because I genuinely think if that was something I was concerned about, that could have been, you know, a nail in the coffin for me,
Yeah.
metaphorically and literally. But,
Yeah.
you know, it did plant seeds of doubt in my head. And it was, so does that mean to be taken seriously by anyone, I need to lose weight? And that was something that stemmed. I mean, quite quickly, that was something that I snapped out of, I guess, essentially because my diet was so limited. I couldn't
Yeah.
diet. There was, you know, I couldn't just choose to eat healthily instead, because I didn't eat the food to be able to do
Yeah.
a traditional diet. So short of, I guess, starving myself, which a university student, I don't have the energy to do that.
Yeah.
It wasn't that way inclined, but I did at that point start to feel like everything was spiraling out of control, which is how the bulimic tendencies started. So I would say in a nutshell, that's my story, but that would have been a very, very long nutshell.
Well, no, I'm glad you told it. That's one hell of a story. I mean, it's not a story, it's your story. If we can back up to AFID for just a second, the immediate thing that jumps in my mind, if you tell someone you have that, would be for them to say, oh, you're just a picky eater, or, as you already kind of alluded to, dismiss. And I find that a lot of the time, dismissal is a huge issue when someone thinks they have an eating disorder and is actively seeking help, which is a huge first step, because, if you're seeking help, at least you've acknowledged to yourself there's something that you want to change, right? How much have you struggled with people basically not taking you seriously?
My entire life. My entire life. Even now, I'm very, very open about it. In the past sort of few years since I managed to get my diagnosis, I was in a comfortable place with, getting help and wrapping my head around it. But my entire life, I've been called just a picky eater. Just try it. How do you know you don't? How do you know you don't like it if you've never tried it? I was like, because I can't. I'm not saying that I don't like it. I'm saying I can't eat it. Like they're different things. There are things that I like the smell of that I'm thinking, oh, maybe I probably would like that. Smell is a big part. But that doesn't mean that I'm able to actually bring myself to eat it. And to be honest, for even after getting my diagnosis and realizing the help, because eating disorders are so taboo, I spent a lot of time explaining myself to other people by saying that I'm just a really fussy eater, or that, the go-to is, oh, why are you eating? Oh, I've got allergies. I mean, it's not an allergy at all. I just can't eat it. But people, when it is something as physical as an allergy, people don't question it. If you tried to say to them that, oh, I have an eating disorder, if they say anything at all, quite often you just get that really panicked blank look like,
I was going to say that probably would be a conversation stopper.
Yeah, I have got a lot better, and I've stopped lying about it and making excuses for it, because a huge part of my advocacy is that we need to talk about it. You mentioned that we've made so huge steps with things like suicidal thoughts, depression, anxiety. And that's only because, in the past sort of half decade, people have had very open, honest, raw discussions about it. And it has been put in the media. And it is sort of something that you see everywhere now. But that's only because them conversations were initially had. And it was actually my boyfriend that made me sort of think about that. It was a work event a couple of years ago that I got myself really panicked about, because there was nothing at the restaurant they were going to that I could eat. And so I made excuses. And he turned around to me and said, Jordan, you talk about wanting to, increase awareness and doing this. It's like, but the first step of that has got to be telling people. And so that's, I told friends, I told people around me, but telling my work colleagues in a professional setting felt like something extremely different. I was like, because at that point, as soon as I mentioned it to them, I had to be referred to occupational health to make sure that I was still I was mentally able to do my job. At the end of the day, I'm an accountant. There's nothing really that interesting about it. It's not like it's something that is heavily based around food or exercise. So it's not like it's a huge risk in that sense of things. But yeah, as soon as I told it, that was a conversation that had to be had, because the HR had to know that I was, well enough to actually be working. Little did they know, I guess, that it has been something I've dealt with my entire life. This is not a new phenomenon to me, but yeah, it was that sort of discussion that sort of really twigged it in my head, and realizing that you're right, because I don't see myself, at least my disorder, my illnesses, represented anywhere in the media. You see some very small discussions on eating disorders, And that has sort of increased in recent years, I suppose. But even then, I think to a large extent they are, well, to a very large extent, they are definitely glamorized. They are still this artificial, basically almost treated as if an eating disorder is just another way to diet, which is so far from the truth. And there is a lot that's happened of late that has really sort of sparked a bit of outrage in me as well. One of the big things being the Kim Kardashian Met Gala dress situation, knowing, very much so that she has a young female audience, that she so publicly broadcasted and was proud of the fact that she lost so much weight in such a short space of time just to fit into a particular outfit.
Into a dress, not to be healthier, not to be happier, but just to fit into a dress. Yeah.
And almost promoting that the way that she lost the weight was normal and okay, which, is extremely, extremely triggering to someone that has had a past with eating disorders, as well as, I think, as I say, it's almost promoting it and glamorizing it to young girls who think that, oh, instead of just buying clothes that fit, I can make my body fit the clothes, which I think is a huge issue in like nowadays anyway. Eating disorders or not, I think that is still something that is a huge issue with men and women, but particularly young girls, in the way that sort of the media and social media speaks to them. And having someone as influential as the Kardashians promoting that lifestyle once again is irritating, to say the least.
I'm imagining it was a little bit more than that. I was going to ask you about the role that social media plays. Obviously, you've mentioned Kim Kardashian, who has a huge social following. But let me ask you this instead. If someone watching this, male or female, is thinking they may have an eating disorder, that's why I wanted to ask you about what you had, because they might go, oh, that sounds like me. Or they have an eating disorder of another type. In terms of taking like first steps in order to, on the path of management or recovery, what would you suggest to them?
I think the first thing is finding someone that you are comfortable talking with and just expressing your concerns with them, whether that is a friend, a family member. It can be a charity helpline. I'm an ambassador for an eating disorder charity here in the UK, and I'm also a volunteer for a crisis line charity. If you can't find someone that is directly in your life to speak to a volunteer, speak to a charity. You can do it anonymously, but they can help, and just speaking it, getting it out, writing it down is a huge first step to actually admitting it, because as we sort of touched on earlier, admitting it to yourself is such a huge step and arguably one of the hardest. And I think until you're able to, as I say, communicate it, I'm not necessarily going to say it out loud, because I think that can be too much for some people. Writing it down, sending it in a text message, as soon as communicating it to someone else, is at that point is when you've admitted it to yourself. Because as long as you're keeping it a secret, it's still not, you're still not accepting that it's true. The reason you're keeping it a secret is because you don't want it to be true. So I think the huge first step is that. I know that I said I had a negative experience with a GP before. I've had many experiences going to different GPs, being passed off. But please don't let that put you off. In the UK, at least, a GP is your first port of call, and they are the person you speak to. Charities like Beat can be really helpful. They have a lot of resources and can talk you through how to bring it up with the GP and how to talk to them about it, to try and get, I guess, the most effective discussion to be taken seriously, and to try and get the help that you need and deserve. But they are just sort of small things. Once you've admitted it to yourself, and once you are accepting of the fact that A, you have an issue, but B, that you want to get help for it, I think that is the biggest thing that you can do. And please just don't be disheartened if you don't get the help straight away. I wish that wasn't the
Mhm.
case, but unfortunately, until we do increase sort of the education and awareness around it, even within the medical profession, it's not likely to be the case. I think that's been highlighted really well, sort of this year, especially by Beat, who run Eating Disorder Awareness Week every year in the UK. And this year they shone a light on the fact that in a doctor, like a GP, in their entire medical training, in their entire medical degree, which equates roughly about 7 years, the maximum amount of training that they will receive is 2 hours on eating disorders in 7 years.
2 hours, not 2 days, not
Two
2 weeks, two
hours.
hours.
And when
Right.
you think about how long, a medical degree isn't just sort of a 9 to 5 sort of situation either. So
Mm.
there is a lot of hours in their days, and 2 hours. And even then, 1 in 5 UK medical schools earlier this year didn't offer any training at all on eating disorders. There were 0 hours in their syllabus to cover, as I say, what are the deadliest of all psychiatric illnesses.
It's it's sad that you mentioned that. I mean, I feel for doctors because obviously with COVID especially, they've been under such strain and stress. But on top of that, doctors receive very little training. I don't know if you know this, but in the field of nutrition in general. And, very often when we're unhealthy, the first port of call is GP in the UK, same here in Australia. But they don't know anything about nutrition. That's why we have qualified nutritionists. And it sort of is scary to me that the first port of call knows sometimes very little about what could actually help you.
Yeah, I mean, I've done mental health first aid training and I've done
Mm,
specific eating disorder training with Beat, and it is genuinely terrifying that me as a civilian, as an accountant, knows
yeah.
more and has had more training than the majority of doctors here. Beat offer the training to hospitals, to medical schools, to GP surgeries. It is completely free. They offer the training for people to access it, but people just don't take them up on it, which is, it's a systemic issue essentially. That needs to
Yeah.
change sort of from the top. And there have been a lot of calls into that recently, and that's one of the reasons I'm very proud to live in Scotland. Scottish unis have been at the forefront of that. They have been working directly with Beat and with Scottish Parliament to sort of work on how they can improve it, to try and take the strain off the NHS as
Hmm.
at crisis point, to try and get to that earlier intervention. I mean, there is still a very long way to go, but just identifying and recognizing that they need to change that, I think, is a very, very
Yeah.
important step.
Is Are there any particular changes that they're thinking of making that would help it? I mean, as you identified, it's a systemic problem. So you're hoping that some sort of change is implemented at the top. What specific changes are they perhaps thinking of implementing?
Well, at least within the universities now, as I said, there was 1 in 5 Scottish unis that offered no training at all, or 1 in 5 UK unis, medical schools that offered no training at all. Now in Scotland, there are 0 medical schools that offer no training. So every medical
Right.
school in Scotland now offers some sort of training. I mean, that amount of training probably is still to be worked on. Um,
Sure.
but it is a start that at least they're making that change. I know the Scottish government have, in the back end of 2021, uh, given a lot of increased funding to Beat as a charity for
Hmm.
their research, and also increased some of the funding to the NHS for sort of mental health and eating disorder treatment facilities. There are definitely some things happening currently that are working against what they've previously done, which
Okay.
again I've had a lot to say on. I've actually been to Parliament recently to have discussions with a few of the Scottish members of Parliament about
Hmm.
some of the proposed changes, something that's already happened down in England and now Scotland are considering following suit. Um, it is introducing mandatory calorie labels on menus when you're eating out, so that all meals have to be labeled up. All food groups, drinks, everything have got to be labeled up with how many calories is in that specific item, with the guise of trying to help obesity levels. But there is very, very little statistical evidence at all to show that doing so will help with obesity, because typically the only people that are that concerned about the number of calories in the food are people that are struggling with disordered eating.
That's a very interesting point you make. We in Australia have legislation where pretty much what you just said is already enacted. So there is not just the calories, but the nutritional breakdown of a food. So, for example, if you go to buy a bottle of Coke or soda, it will have the amount of sugars, proteins, fats, obviously not in Coke, and the amount of energy, the amount of calories it has in it. But the obesity rate in Australia has not gone down at all. But as you said, someone, and I've never thought of it actually in this way, but someone who has disordered eating would actually be more affected probably by that label in a negative way than an overweight person is going to consider decreasing the amount they eat because of the same label.
Yeah, and I think that's the issue that I've essentially been trying to raise with Parliament. And I know that, I've been doing that from a personal level and also as a Beat ambassador, because before this, it's a lot easier to try and stop something from happening and reverse it once it already has. So whilst they are still in the discussion point of getting this legislation through, I think that's really the key time to be trying to highlight to them just, the impact that it could have. It's not, not the desired impact, as I say, it is a negative consequence of what they're considering, and that is how they've acknowledged it themselves, and it's weighing up whether that potential negative outweighs the potential positive. But from my point of view and the point of view of a lot of people like me, then yes, that definitely does. As you say, there's nothing really that the people that are overweight aren't particularly concerned about it. But
no, that's why they probably got overweight in the first place. I mean, if you were that interested in the nutritional content of your food, you'd probably be in a better place. Are you feeling hopeful? I mean, you said you've had discussions. Are you feeling hopeful, or has it been a case of beating your head against a brick wall?
Somewhere between the two, I think. It goes back and forth.
Beating your head against a hopeful brick wall? Hopefully beating your head against a brick wall.
The way that, Parliament here works is that there are, there's quite a few different political parties. Obviously, all of them have got their own opinions, their own standpoints on it. So when I've spoken to certain parties, they have been much more hopeful, optimistic, understanding conversations. Other parties have been considerably more set in their ways and not really wanting to acknowledge the issues. But then those parties are also ones who are quite well known in the UK for not being particularly pro NHS to begin with. One of the things I've highlighted is you've just done all of this incredible work in the past sort of 12, 18 months to try and increase funding and education for eating disorders. But by bringing in this change, you are potentially just undoing all of the good that you've done, because yes, you gave that funding, but the amount of people needing help will rise astronomically, because not just the people that are currently suffering, people that are currently suffering with eating disorders, people that are in recovery that may find themselves in relapse, because yes, calories are labeled on all food that you buy in a supermarket, but it is much, much easier to not look at because it's not right in front of you. You've got to actively search for it. Whereas now on menus, it is labeled right next to the price. If you want to know how much you're paying, you're also, what is going into it. And it's not the full nutritional value. It is just the kcal amount.
Just calories, right.
That's all that's shown on there. It doesn't tell you about the fat content, the sugar content, the salt content. It just tells you the calories, and it is labeled right next to the price. So there is no way to not see that unless you ask for, and it's something some restaurants have been quite good at doing. As I say, I'm speaking about this from the English point of view because it was introduced
Yeah.
there a few months ago. And as I've got all of my family are down in England, I've visited quite a few times. A lot of web restaurants are offering a calorie-free menu, but you have to explicitly ask for it. One
Right.
of the issues with eating disorders that I have found myself, and I know a lot of other people will attest to as well, is that your entire time suffering with and in recovery from is that you are made to feel very other, very isolated. And it's just highlighting that you are different and not normal.
Mm.
And so someone actively having to ask to then
Yeah.
have the different menu, not the one that's on the table, is really just instilling and reinforcing that idea of I'm other. I need special considerations when really all I want to
Yeah.
do is just to be able to go out with my family and my friends and go and enjoy a meal. Something that is
Yeah.
already extremely difficult for me to do is now being made 10 times harder.
I wonder how it would go if instead of putting the menu down that has the calories, putting that one by default, whether they reverse that and just keep the menus, which also would save money. And then if people wanted, for some reason, a menu with a caloric count on it, they can ask for that. But I can't see many people asking for that menu. Why would you want it?
You want to go out, and if you're going out for a meal, you're probably
Enjoy.
going out socially to enjoy it.
Yeah.
Even people that are on very strict diets, nutritionalists, training, whatever you're doing, if you're doing it for a specific reason, you probably likely already know what the healthy and unhealthy
Yeah.
options are. So you know what to
Exactly.
avoid and what not to avoid. But you're going out for a sociable occasion. You don't need that constant reminder because I think, when you go out to a restaurant as well, the meal that you have could be the exact same thing essentially you have at home, but the calorie content in the restaurant version is going to be higher because of the environment it's cooked in
Well,
and all of the little extras it's been given. That's what makes it
that's the
taste
thing.
nice.
Because ironically, if you actually have a very particular diet, for example, low carb or keto, you'd actually would know already what to eat and what to avoid. You probably wouldn't trust the restaurants anyway, because the information, once again, the information you'd need to know is not the caloric count. It's the carbs, the proteins, the fats, preservatives, for example. That's what you'd need to know, not
Yeah.
caloric count.
No, and it's things like I can't remember where I was at recently, but I was out for a meal and I got sort of like grilled chicken, um,
Mm,
potatoes, just and like a little bit of veg on the side. It was all quite bland because that's what my diet is.
yeah.
And the calorie content on that was over 1,000 calories. I was like, I was eating chicken, potato, and veg. I was like, that
Mm,
back home, I know in my flat, if I looked at the food in my fridge, if I actually specifically looked at the labels, wouldn't be that high. But seeing it on a menu in front of me made me
yeah.
then question what I was eating at home as well. Because I'm like, well, this is just like a meal that I would eat and cook for myself. I was like, am I really being this unhealthy all of the time? It's not unhealthy.
Yeah. Yeah. Look, it's a huge issue, and there's so many ways to come at it from. In terms of Miss Universe GB, how, let's say if you were fortunate enough to take out the title, how do you see yourself using the title? Or how have you even used your presence as a Miss Universe GB finalist? How have you used that to further awareness about eating disorders? And are there certain goals that you have in terms of, a certain audience that you want to get in front of and spread a message and that sort of thing?
I mean, definitely. I think I've ticked off a couple of the really big goals for myself just
Hmm.
as a finalist, which is something I'm incredibly proud of. And that is that I've been in national press sharing my story specifically of ARFID. Like you mentioned earlier, with the hopes that someone reading it might resonate because I tried to give as much detail as I can.
Yeah.
Without also verging, it's finding the fine line of giving detail to inform people without giving too much to trigger people.
Yep. Yeah.
But having that sort of national coverage has been a huge, huge boost for me because I have had a lot of messages of support and things after that. And I've had messages from
Mm.
people who found me on social media off the back of the article, thanking me for sharing my story and, bits of advice on how to deal with getting help from medical professionals, who to reach out to. And then the other side of that is going at it from a political standpoint. As I say, I've been to Scottish Parliament multiple times in the past couple of months to speak with different members. I've been emailing back and forth for the past few months as well with a lot of people. I've got a quite sort of strong working relationship now with a few different MSPs, which I'm feeling really grateful for. Because when there have been things on consultations and stuff that they've wanted to discuss, they email me and ask for my take before anything else. And I think that is a huge accomplishment, and it's something I'm incredibly proud to say, that I have that, and I'm able to be that voice as someone that is very open and honest and quite emotionally resilient to it all, that I'm able to do that for people that maybe aren't at that point in their recovery just yet. But with Miss Universe Great Britain, if I were to win, I would be definitely continuing with that. I think that having the national title going to Miss Universe would give me the chance to elevate that even further, taking it internationally in terms of the media. And also, I've spoken with Scottish Parliament. I would very, very much like to get an audience with Parliament down in Westminster as well. They are separate bodies. They have, in terms of the healthcare system, they have Scotland and England have got separate systems. So the discussions I'm having in Scotland aren't
carry over
going
to
down,
England.
carrying over down to England. Well, England and Wales are sort of a one little in itself, and then Scotland's got its own. But so they're conversations that I definitely want to have, but using more so the title as a public figure to try and help tackle the issue of the glamorization of eating disorders in the media. I think, using a very glamorous title to de-glamorize eating disorders can be a very, very powerful thing to do.
Absolutely. I mean, you will have your work cut out for you because, unfortunately, what you mentioned with the Kim Kardashian incident, I can't see that stopping anytime soon, unfortunately. And it really, I mean, you said it annoys you. It really annoys me as well, as when someone who has that amount of wealth, fame, and influence seems to post without really thinking of the ramifications. I mean, I'm sure she does, and I obviously don't know her personally, but it just seems to me when you have that large of an audience, it does behoove you to actually go, is this message that I'm spreading the most positive or the best one that I could put out? I understand she has the money to get that dress. Whether she should have gotten that dress is another matter entirely. But then to literally starve yourself, in essence, to fit the dress rather than finding a dress. I mean, how many women want Kim Kardashian's body to begin with? And then it's like the message she's saying is, well, my body's not good enough. I needed to change it to fit into the dress. It just does seem like a very backwards and very harmful, potentially harmful message.
Yeah, I mean, like you say, your work cut out for you. I'm never, as an individual person, it is highly unlikely that I'm ever going to be able to stop things like that from happening. I think the biggest things that could make huge progressions in it would be just to add some regulation on that. There is a lot of regulation already in terms of what can and can't be posted on social media in terms of adverts and how transparent they've got to be. And there are, all of the filters that pop up for sensitive content, which I think, are really helpful to some extent. I just would like to see more regulation for, sensitive topics such as eating disorders as well. I know that with the posts that I do about eating disorders, certain hashtags, if I use them on my post, will mean that my post just gets buried because they don't want people to see things that are considered, that
banned.
harmful.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing, as I say, is just as someone that would be a public figure, is just putting out the real content out there. It's like you can't get rid of this problematic thing altogether, but what you can do is just add small bits of good and just to slowly let that pile of good grow.
Absolutely. I mean, we can only do what we can do, but at least you're doing something. And that's all that I think any of us can ask of ourselves. Just before we move towards the close, I mean, I find this a fascinating topic, so I could talk to you about it forever, and it's certainly one that needs more conversation. You have Ralph over here who has said good luck. He's watching over from the United States. Danny is still here. She said, yes, correct, Jeanette's first pageant. Sheridan, who was our Miss Earth Australia first runner-up, she was watching as well. And then Danielle has said a couple of things here. Implementation of calories on menus will discourage people with EDs, eating disorders, from making progress and eating out. And then she's also said, if it doesn't fit, it's not it. Spoken by the pageant stylist. So, Jordan, just before, hitting my own microphone, just before we move to the close, is there anyone that you would like to give a shout out to for supporting you along your journey, pageant and otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I sort of mentioned it earlier on, but my parents and my partner have been so incredibly supportive. My parents my entire life, my partner for the past like 7.5 years, for my eating disorder journey, my recovery journey, and just very much being there, standing up for me and supporting me when I wasn't able to do it for myself, and now giving me the encouragement and motivation to keep going, both within pageantry and without. It's huge. And also a huge one just to my sponsor, Coco Cosmetics by Chloe. She is a small female-owned business in the UK, cosmetics. It's just taken TikTok by storm, and she's doing incredibly well for herself. I've been a supporter of the brand since they first launched in 2017, so to now have her support back it feels like a really nice full circle moment, and I'm extremely grateful for that.
Perfect. Okay, well, let's go to the final 10 questions. Now, I was putting a time limit on it, and then I've decided, no, I'm going to stop doing that. So you just get the final 10 questions. I keep going back and forth. I'm being indecisive. But let's go to it. Number 1, what is your favorite word?
Inimitable.
Nice. I've never had that one before. I like that one. Number 2, what is your least favorite word?
Squelch.
Is that like a moist kind of word? Many people hate the word moist. Is squelch your moist?
Yeah, I mean, moist doesn't really bother me that much. It's just like, well, the actual noise something makes when it squelches is not particularly pleasant, and I just think the word describes it. Like,
if Danielle was watching, I'm just going to say this to trigger her, because squelch sounds like the sound the snail makes when you step on it. So
that is a really good description of what a squelch would be.
There you go. And now she's watching. I assure you, she will comment back. She is phobic of stepping on snails. So moving on, now that I've traumatized Danielle, number 3, in life, what gets you excited or what turns you on?
Finding something that I'm really motivated and passionate about doing. That can be a lot of different things, but just finding that thing that you can really, the moment that you recognize that you have something that you're really passionate about, I think that in itself is such a like invigorating feeling.
I think also when you've worked towards it for all your life and then you finally find it, it's just that much more rewarding. So I can completely empathize with that one. So that was what turns you on. What about question 4? What turns you off?
Single-mindedness.
Close-mindedness?
Yeah, like one track mind, one thought, like just very close-minded.
So I've achieved my goal here, as you can see. Moving on, question 6: what sound or noise do you love?
Laughing, particularly babies laughing. I've just not long had a new niece enter the world, and I get videos very frequently of her just giggling away, and it honestly makes my day.
What sound or noise do you hate?
I hate the sound of a dog crying because it just makes me really sad.
Well, I don't think anyone is made happy by the sound of a dog crying.
No,
You
but
mean
I
that
love
high-pitched kind
dogs
of
and
whimpering noise?
I love dogs so much. And honestly, like it's one of them things that just like hurts my heart a little bit when I hear it. I'm just like, oh, I just want to, yeah.
Um, Question 7. If you could have any one superpower, what would you pick and why?
I think I teleport because there's a lot of places that I really want to go to, things that I want to do, and I can't be in all of them places at once. But if I could, cut out the however many hours of traveling, it would go a long way to help me do more.
You guys in the UK shouldn't complain too much. You guys can hop on a cheap flight and be in another country within 2 hours. I just had my travel agent here today to come from Australia to anywhere. It's like 15, 20 hours. So I could definitely use the ability to teleport. Also save me a lot of money.
Yeah,
Um,
that too.
yeah. Question 8. What job other than your own would you most like to attempt?
Hmm. I think I'd quite like to be a flight attendant, maybe. I don't know, just the idea of traveling, and I don't know if it's something that I could do, really long term. I don't know. It's not something I've ever tried, but I think it looks like a very sort of interesting experience to have at least.
Slightly different to accounting.
Very different, yeah.
Can I ask you, and I mean no offense by this, but do you find accountants boring? Because accountants and lawyers, to me, are the two occupations that most people seem to find slightly boring or dislike.
I mean, I think it depends. Different type of accountants. There are a lot of different things. I think the traditional middle-aged white man that I work with a lot, maybe. Not all of them. I think I have a really good team at work. There's a
Yeah,
lot of sort of the environment that I work in, there's a lot of younger people. The staff turnover is quite high. So I'm working with different
yeah,
people all the time, which I think definitely makes it a bit more interesting. But you do definitely have a few sort of dull. But I mean, when your
sure.
job, I think people link it to the job itself being a bit more dull rather than the
Yeah,
people. What I find is that the people have got to overcompensate because the job is actually a little bit dull. So
right. Okay. All right.
we have
I've
quite a
never
bit
thought
of
of it that way.
fun and laugh, as I say, because the job, like the amount, I mean, you can tell the amount I speak is a lot. Because otherwise I would go absolutely stir crazy just staring at a spreadsheet all day.
Do you know any good accountant jokes?
Oh, not really. They're all really,
Okay, never
really
mind.
cheesy, like really bad. We've got a lot when we do pub quizzes and stuff. There's a lot of like accountant team name sort of things going on, but they're all really bad.
Accountant team name.
Yeah,
What on
like
earth?
puns.
Yeah, give me an example if you could.
Oh God, like and you've got like so one of the really do I hate this one and it just makes me feel very, very like in lack of creativity. But people do like account ants, like as in account ants. There's bean counters. You've got like general like instead of a general ledger, you've got like general legends, just
No,
generally terrible along those lines. Like
no,
when I'm saying bad, I'm meaning I
no.
like a pun.
I'm sorry
They are
I
not good
asked.
puns.
I'm sorry I asked. All right, let's move on. I was hoping for more imagination.
No.
Question 9. What job would you definitely not like to attempt?
Um, a fishmonger or anything to do with like, yeah, just the smell.
I can certainly sympathize with that one. Moving on. Final question, number 10. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Um, your family and friends are waiting for you at the bar. would be quite a nice.
Well, if you happen to win the title a week from now, what would your drink of choice be? Would you treat yourself to a drink?
Maybe I might let myself into it. I'm either a gin. I like a flavor like a fruity gin, like a citrus one, or
Yeah.
I'm also partial to a cosmopolitan. I like a cocktail.
Very nice. All right. Well, Jordan, that's about it. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me.
And I certainly enjoyed chatting to you, and I wish you all the best with Miss Universe GB and also with the advocacy moving forwards, because I'm sure that it's something that you will carry on with regardless of the pageant result. So best of luck with that. I will keep you on the line for just a second whilst I hang up with the audience. But thanks to everyone for watching, including Danny, who's traumatized by me mentioning snails. Just remember, Danny, squelch, all right? I didn't say it, Jordan said it, so blame her. And we will speak to you next time. Bye for now. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Sorority Access is now open. So if you'd like to join an amazing group of women and learn how to be the most powerful, confident, and impactful queen possible, head to thepageantsorority.com. I'll see you there and see you in the next video.